The standard operating procedure for how to hire people, it just produced horrible results for us. It's hard to describe how bad they were. Probably around late 2014, 2015, started thinking like, how is this? There's got to be a better way. I joined some executive coaching at the time in 2016 and learned about a whole different set of ways to think about things. Essentially, with this executive coaching program. That was wild. It was incredible. It was incredible to be in a room full of entrepreneurs and like over 100. And I found out, hey, this guy in rural Pennsylvania here, I'm not the only one having these problems. It was incredible validation to think, the proverbial you are not alone. Well, most of the room had those problems in one form or another.
Welcome to the Super Clinic Project Podcast, where we take regular clinic owners and turn them into cash-based multimillionaire entrepreneurs. Warning, if you're a doctor who listens to this podcast regularly, you will make millions of dollars. Do not listen to this podcast unless you want to be a successful clinic owner who helps thousands of patients achieve their health goals and adds more money than you can imagine to your bank account. You've been warned.
Welcome to the Super Clinic Project Podcast, where we take regular clinic owners and turn them into super clinic owners. I'm one of your hosts, Jennifer Gligoric, and today you'll be here with me and a guest that I know you're going to like. His story started when he and his wife, both optometrists, decided to start their own private practice and entrepreneurial journey in Pennsylvania, where they're still located. And quickly they realized that hiring the right people, putting them in the right roles, wasn't as easy as they imagined. And in fact, their failures in getting great, dependable staff were crippling their growth. And that led them to, it led our guest today to be the founder of Build My Team, where you throw away the resume, you don't need it, and you will get people who can actually do the job and are excited for the job, and you're just going to love it. So let us welcome a big super clinic welcome to Dr. Mike Neal of Build My Team. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. I'm excited for our talk today.
I am too. So you've made incredible shifts in your business, and now you have this whole other business. But let's go back to the beginning and talk about your journey as an entrepreneur running a clinic, because that's who we're talking to is our clinic owners. Tell me a little bit about that, how you got started and how you realized what a problem, getting the right people.
Well, my wife started the practice initially back in 2002. Boy, oh boy, many moons ago. I joined in 2008. April 29th, 2008 is when I started. I remember that date because the practice burnt down. The whole building burnt to the ground. We were left with a rubber stamper, and that's it. That is it, a rubber stamper. Why would a rubber stamper survive a fire? I don't know.
You would think that the rubber stamper would just be the first thing that would melt.
I got to tell you, I spent more time than I'd like to admit wondering why we were left with a stamper. But that was it. Everything burnt down. It was ash, and the fire was so hot. I think there were 7, if I recall correctly, 7 fire companies that came out for that. And that's how I came into the business. I came into the practice itself. Woke up at 1:34 in the morning by the alarm company telling us there was a fire.
Man, yeah. That is. Well, talk about from the fry pan into literal fire to go into business then. So then how long did it take you to rebuild? What was your plan? What did you do then? I mean, that would just completely sweep you, off your feet.
Well, we were in a temporary space above a sandwich shop. We were open within, I think, 7 or 8 days. And I mean, I lost a year of my life in sleep and stress and the rest of it, but we were able to put together a phenomenally fast response. We saw our first patient, I think it was 7 or 8 days later. The practice we had eyeglasses that were brought in by frame reps. We had some equipment that some folks were able to help us get right away. I look back on that and it's shocking we were able to do that bluntly. But we were, and every day, I was wrapped up in everything but patient care at that time. My wife was wrapped up in patient care and we lost all the records too, by the way. So nightmare after nightmare. And every night she came home smelling like tacos because we're located above a sandwich shop with poor ventilation.
No. It's better than smelling like other things, I guess. But no, that now you probably are like, that smell, right?
Yeah, Taco Tuesday has a completely new meaning for us.
I bet it does. I bet it does. And so how long were you above the sandwich shop?
April or March 2009 is when we moved into new space. It was build out. So we had to come up with well, first of all, find the space. In a rural area, that is hard. You don't have Class A office space just kicking around in a rural area. We had some built for us by a wonderful landlord, absolutely wonderful guy. And he basically put his money where his mouth was and built out the space for us on a lease and a really important handshake.
Man, that's incredible. I've worked
Yeah.
with clinics in rural areas, and it's a completely different animal when you
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about making a move. I mean,
Mhm.
it is definitely a deal, and not in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very difficult, but we made the move in March of 2009 and still in that location. Absolutely fantastic. Love it there.
Oh, good, good. And so when did you start hiring staff? Did you have staff above the taco shop, or did you wait until you went into your build out?
No, we did. And there were some transitions there pretty quickly because of the stress, the this, the that surrounding it. And so we ended up keeping those folks. One fellow had to leave due to a family situation, etc. But we were able to move into the new space, hired people, and we were so lucky, so lucky to be able to pull that off. I mean, I remember being interviewed the day after the fire on the local TV station. I
Oh,
told them we were going to rebuild the practice. We would be open within a couple of days. And the reporter was blown away by that. And I said, we've got wonderful people that are helping us. We are, I don't think I mentioned it, but we were working 20 plus hours a day, productive too, and got it done. Yeah.
that's
Very
just
fortunate.
that's just absolutely amazing. But when you do have good people around you and you put in the work, it is amazing what you're able to do. So
Yeah.
now you're in your new building and you have a couple of staff. Tell me a little bit about that journey. I want to transition into the purpose of it, like how Build My Team came into existence, because it took almost 15 years for you to do that. But let's talk a little bit about the hiring aspect of being a clinic owner.
Yeah, I think I would refer to after the fire in a lot of ways. Those were the dark years, the very difficult
Mm.
years, hiring wise. We're in a small area, very rural. We don't have a talent pool. We have a talent puddle. And it was a couple inches deep max at that point in time. We were trying to hire experienced people. We were trying to hire, I say trying, I mean, we did hire that way as best as we could. A lot of people, we don't have experience in a rural area. I remember saying to somebody that it was more likely for an optician, to hire an eye doctor than it was to find an optician in our area, the eye doctor versus a person that does the glasses. And, what we realized over time is, especially with that position, is we have to train them. It's totally trainable. They're the position is trainable as long as you are training a trainable person. And it turns out we weren't, over and over and over again. Part of this is a trainer, part of it was the trainee, but we just had the wrong people. Jennifer, that's the crux of this whole problem. We brought on the wrong people
So
repetitively.
but they don't seem like the wrong people, because
Nope.
you were following what everyone does, right? You were
Yeah.
putting ads out and getting people in and
Yeah.
checking boxes that they, you worked
Mhm.
for this doctor before, and what was that like, right? And go ahead.
Well, I think there are a couple things that were really problematic about the approach. We tend to believe people as docs when they tell us something. You don't think that somebody's just going to make stuff up or, embellish. I mean, when patients do that clinically, a lot of times you can tell, but flat out cook stuff up is not something you're accustomed to being a doctor, right? And
I have a good story on this. We just had a client who hired, and they need an admin assistant. This person was like, I've done EHRs, I've worked in lots of different spreadsheets, and blah, 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 blah. Right. And they were like, okay, great. They had a resume of experience. They were an older, they had like 15 years experience. They weren't right out of the, like the turnip truck. That shows you how old I am. But yeah, who didn't just fall off a turnip truck. They'd been around and they had been at other places. They did references and they were like, yeah, but they were like, so is there anything you can tell me? Very generic sort of questions. Yeah. And then they started training, and it took them 2 people just to teach this person how to access spreadsheets. And they didn't even know how to scroll up and down inside of Excel. And the client called me and said, am I being ridiculous? And I was like, no, that person catfished you completely of who they were. You don't wait. Well, maybe I should give them more time. Maybe I need to be more. And I was like, no, you were lied to. That's not someone that you can invest time in. You have to let them go. And funnily enough, the call was like, hey, we really needed you to be able to do. And they were like, okay, they knew they were lying. Yep. There's no fight with that, right? Mm-hmm. But I thought it's nuts, but I've seen it over and over again. You don't think people will lie about skills, but they will.
Yeah. And I think a lot of, like, let's face it, doctors and practice managers tend to be extremely ethical people. And we extrapolate our worldview onto the rest of the world, especially job candidates. Don't do that. I mean, flat out, don't do that. I'll tell you just a super quick thing.
No,
one of my questions is like in a discussion with a candidate when I was doing it at the time. This is midway before Build My Team and the approach we take now. It was simply to ask them if they knew how to type. Yes, great. Guess what, Jennifer? You walk them to a computer and you have them type something on the computer. This is not typing. Right. How many words a minute do you type? Oh, 70, 80, like this. Hunt, peck, come on. You're lying. You're just flat out lying. Why would you start a relationship with anything but the truth? And so simply asking them to type, as ridiculous as that was, removed, I don't know, around a third, 40% of the candidates.
That's
just
not
like
ridiculous.
That.
My mom, I tell a lot of people that my mother had a staffing company. She had it for over 54 years. And my job, like, I was in grade school and I had to work, right? And so I would work there and the ladies would come in. At that time, they had these big bouffant hairdos and they'd walk in. I'd set them up on an IBM Selectric and I'd put the typing test around them, give them the ashtray, because back then they always had their things. And they would literally put the cigarette in, they'd light it, and then they'd look at me. They'd get all their margins set up because it was manual. If you wanted to bold something, you had to type the letter backspace and type it again. That's how you bolded. You underlined it by doing the same thing. And they would do their little, set it up, and then I would turn the timer, and then they would go. And that cigarette never left their mouth through this 5-minute typing test. And then I got to grade the test. And then I would give them a score, right? Like how many words per minute. And I had a little sheet that showed me how to do it, right? And I'm now as an adult, I was impressed that they could do 70 to 80 words a minute while doing the backspace, making everything look perfect. Yeah. I mean, these women had talent, but also too, the ash from that cigarette would never fall. Like they had that timed more than anything else, but it was crazy. But then they also had to do a spelling test, a basic, can you do a spelling test? And then they had a real basic grammar test that had to do with, business letters, would you put a dear sir? How would you do the CC at the bottom? And so for anyone who was secretarial, that was the most basic things they needed to know. Right. And it was, and you didn't get people that were lying then because it was just assumed you would be tested on it.
Right.
So being tested should be, like now knowing that people don't even test them, it was like, well, they could say anything.
Right. And they do, Jennifer. That's the crazy thing. They do.
So when the person came up and they're typing, I'm just very curious because I know we have a little bit of time here and they're just like sitting there doing with their fingers. How was your reaction?
I smiled. I asked them if that was 70 words a minute, that particular person. They smiled back. They knew the gig was up. Like, you've been busted. You lied. You've been busted. Out you go.
Yeah.
Don't let the door hit you in the you know what on the way out. You
Yeah,
just
you might
wasted
need.
everybody's time. Sayonara.
So you're going through all of this. How long did it take for you to start going, you know what, there's got to be a better way to do it? Because you've
Yeah,
been
well,
following the rules, the quote unquote rules until this point.
yeah, I mean, the standard operating procedure for how to hire people, it just produced horrible results for us. It's hard to describe how bad they were. And, as far as, boy, probably around late 2014, 2015, started thinking like, how is this? There's got to be a better way. I joined some executive coaching at the time in 2016 and learned about just a whole different set of ways to think about things, essentially, with this executive coaching program. That was wild. It was incredible. It was incredible to be in a room full of entrepreneurs and like over 100. And I found out, hey, this guy in rural Pennsylvania here, me, I'm not the only one having these problems. It was incredible validation to think, the proverbial you are not alone. Well, most of the room had those problems in one form or another.
They still do.
So got to take a look at how they were, the company that hosted it, the coaching program themselves, how they were doing their hiring. And it was so different than how we were. No wonder we were getting terrible results, like sitting in an interview, asking somebody if they can handle stress. How many people say, nope, no, it really isn't for me.
Right? Nobody says that. They're like, yeah, I'm good at that. Just
No, what they say is they've got sweat dripping down their forehead. Their palms are sweaty. Everything's clammy. They got a fake smile plastered on their face and they're shaking and they handle stress well. Come on. I've seen that. I've seen that more than once in an interview. It's comical. It was like a Saturday Night Live sketch right in front of me. But, that's just how those go, especially when you're interviewing somebody for an entry level position and you're the proverbial doctor or authoritative figurehead. You are intimidating. You might not realize it, but you are by position and by default. And then the other thing we were talking about with resumes, it's bad. It was bad then. It has gotten to the point where they are created. They're fabricated.
I talk about this all the time. It's all fake.
Yeah.
They're just keyword stuff now because of AI. You can take a job description, take your education, say create a resume specifically for this job, and put all the keywords that applicant tracking system is going to look for, because humans have been taken out of the mix, and then it just spits out the perfect thing, and then that's all you're getting is these perfect fluff things that say absolutely nothing about the candidate's ability to do that job.
We we had a resume for a medical secretary. I read the thing and I'm like, why aren't you running Microsoft? You're applying for a secretary position. Why aren't you running Microsoft? Your resume reads like you should be running Microsoft. What gives? Good grief. It was so made up. It was ridiculous. And this isn't a one-time story. This just happens routinely. It's the MO for how these people are applying nowadays. So we just flat out quit the process of using resumes and developed a different way to do it.
Yeah, this is what I'm really fascinated with. This is what the rest of our thing's going to be. But when I first heard about this, I really geeked out. I geeked out and I got nervous because I just, I'm really about the human-centric thing, bring humanity back, like AI. I've watched Terminator, I know what happens with that. But then I also use AI in a lot of stuff, and it does save me a lot of time. But I'm competent what I'm asking AI to do. So it gives me exactly what I know I want. It's just instead of 10 hours to getting this, I'm spending a matter of moments to get something written out, right? If you go to AI and you don't have the competency, then what you get, you don't even know if it's good or not. Many times it isn't. But so tell everybody about Build My Team and what you do, because this blew me away.
Well, out of the necessity that was our practice, I looked at how those companies, like this coaching company, I also looked at how Disney, the Four Seasons, just incredibly high functioning service organizations, how they were doing their hiring. and they didn't start with resumes. I mean, of course, people apply to the positions, they submit a resume, but that wasn't where they started. They started through an assessment process. And what does that mean? It means that like what we built, the candidate gets a text from our client asking them to fill out the process, to start the process of determining what their natural strengths and talents are. We have it worded incredibly eloquently. They click the link. They start by filling out this assessment process. And this takes about 10 minutes, a little longer for some people. What we're told by these assessments are what they're naturally good at. Tells us.
That's just amazing to me because
Yeah.
I'm looking at, looking at it on both ends as the applicant in that this is so much better, right? So even though you're probably sourcing tons of resumes, at the same time, you're only going to get back the people that go into the process, the ones that are actively looking. Because most of the times you're just getting resumes submitted by people who've already got a job or that resume is old.
Yeah.
I mean, Indeed is the worst for giving you, oh, yeah, I put my resume up there 3 years ago and I forgot to turn it off, right?
Mhm.
You're just getting, and you're like, oh, well, you would have been perfect. Oh, well. Or that you just get ghosted, right? And you never get anything back. So you're only getting people that, number one, have an interest to begin with, which is half of the problem. And then you're not devaluing them or putting them off, because I've got to tell you, when you apply for anything, when I have to re-put in my resume manually into like Workday or one of those and retype everything I've already given them, I automatically hate the company. I'm automatically like, you don't know what you're doing. I don't care how big you are. That's ridiculous. And then if I have to pay for anything, I'm not going to do it. Number one, that's a scam. But two, if I'm taken through multiple like Briggs Myers and all this stuff like that, I find that very invasive. And also too, this is 3 hours of, I don't even know if you might even like me. Those ones I'm not going to do. But then again, as on paper for most places, I'm a really great candidate, but you'd never even talk to me because I would automatically piece out of that process.
Of course.
So if it's something like this, though, 10 minutes, that's perfectly acceptable. I'm so willing to do that because as a regular person who is not going to lie in an interview, I really want to be somewhere where I can be valued, where I walk in, I know they really like me and I'm doing a good job. Yeah. I mean, I think that, the majority of good candidates that you want, that's what they're wanting too. So
you hit so many nails on the head with that. Approximately half, within a couple percent or two, of people that we send that link to never open it. They never click it. Those are the people that I really wonder if they physically exist or if they even have looked at anything. Tire kicking is one thing, but could be bots, could be otherwise. And remember, those resumes that get submitted to your business, your practice, you're printing all those out, whether the person exists or not. You're reviewing them, whether the person exists or not. So for what we found out, there's so many learnings from this. We cut the amount of completely wasted time on step one by half.
That's just amazing. I mean, it's huge. It is huge for an organization to not have to do that. I was so excited to hear it because, I've done a lot of HR. I've worked. I mean, I was a headhunter for a while. My mother owned the staffing, and then I became under my early career was all in staffing. But I work with clinic owners all the time. I've physically been in service-based businesses. And it has just gotten harder and harder because the overwhelm of just getting these tons of resumes and going, you're in Ohio, I'm in Texas. How did you even get here? Like, I have to sit there and read your life story. You didn't send a cover. You didn't tell me anything. And it just, there's the people that are completely don't even live there, have no idea they were submitted. And all of that is time. And time should be at a premium,
So our system, there's a couple things I want to mention. Our system's automated. And at the end of the automated process, it gives a thumbs up as to whether or not the person can do the job. We can get into details more if you want. But we also have the most boneheaded questions that we ask these candidates. And you hit the nail on the head. One of the questions we ask, And these are what we call our knockout questions. Okay.
Mm.
So our software automatically gently removes people from the application process if they don't meet the criteria. One of them is simply, how far do you live from this particular practice? Well, guess what? If you are an hour away in a city, do you think there's a chance that that person ever stays at your practice for more than 2 to 3 weeks? Like, no,
No, that's a
flat out no.
desperation. That is a
Desperation.
desperation
Yep.
unless they move.
Right.
They would
And
have to be stellar and say, I'm looking to move. If this
Yep.
works out, I will get an apartment here. They've got to be
Exactly.
mobile. Not,
And we
I've been in my
accommodate.
house 20 years. They're
Yeah.
not moving.
Right. We accommodate for that. I'm moving into the area. I'm looking at this position. We accommodate for that. Another is, here are the hours of the practice. Are you able to work these hours? Well, you'd be shocked at how many people can't. Like congratulations. I know you want a job that pays you full time to work from 10 to 2 on a Thursday and a Friday with a 2-hour lunch. God bless America. I really hope you nail one of those positions, but it's not with us. It's not with our client. This is a position where you have to show up to take care of people. I get passionate about this, but it gets very frustrating when we see in mass that these effects are happening around the country and they're just categorically wasting everybody's time. That's why we put these things in place. We're also looking for, we want them to make the first offer on a comp, like an hourly wage. If your practice is offering maybe $15, $17 an hour and they offer 12, you don't offer them 12. Offer them 13, 14, that type of thing. It gives them a huge step up, gives them runway to provide that value. You protect your practice at all times, and the candidate's thrilled.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of those that we're doing. But the main,
that's low though. I don't know anybody's paying under 20 something now because of,
what it tells you is that the person's desperate. So you have to be careful. They're lowballing you, and you have to be very cautious about that. Mm-hmm. So those are things that our team members help our clients with. But the main purpose of what we did to remove the resume was to determine people's natural strengths and talents. And things like, and by the way, this is again automated before we meet the person, before we even know if they're male or female, what they look like. None of that matters. It's determining their strengths and talents. And the output of this process is what we call our insight report. And the insight report is a couple-page PDF that summarizes everything this candidate's good at.
That's what a difference that makes. That's why I was so excited when I heard about it. Number one, the automation point, to be able to know that there is something out there that had clinics in mind, because healthcare professionals are different. It's a different beast than retail or a legal firm. And so to be able to do the strengths for that particular job in this particular niche, you might get someone who maybe they didn't graduate, right? Mm-hmm. But yet everything else is perfectly aligned and they're going to be an awesome person. You would be able to find these types of people that are going to be your best employee, that's somebody that you just love seeing every day.
There is no doubt about that. We don't work based upon experience. So we don't hire doctors, and we can hire for experience, but we generally find it's completely unnecessary. Obviously for unlicensed positions or to get people into licensed positions, it's unnecessary. We've demonstrated over and over again that to get an A+ applicant who is really going gangbusters for this position, they really want to do it. They're smart. We know because we measure their speed of learning. We know how smart they are. And getting that person into the position, they don't have to unlearn anything, Jennifer. You don't have to try and tell them, I know you did it at Dr. Smith's office that way, but we're not Dr. Smith. We don't have to do any of that. They just roll in
all the time.
Constantly. They roll in. They're not a brontosaurus dinosaur that you have to teach them how to scroll in Excel. That's wild.
It was I thought that was wild. And they weren't even that they were just like, I want to say older, but not that older. But it's the mindset. You can get someone in their 20s that have this mindset. They were taught that one way and they just want to do it that one way. Right. And then you can get someone who's in their 50s or 60s and they might be like super nimble,
right.
And they just sit there and like, okay, I'm going to dump with that and I'm going to learn this.
Yeah, and that's why our software makes these suggestions. It gives a thumbs up, and it doesn't know the person's age, it doesn't know their gender, it doesn't know their race. It is literally, we don't know any of that stuff when those finalists are selected. So, you know, it's so frustrating. You contrast this to sitting across a desk or a table from someone where, yes, I'm great at everything they tell you in the interview. You know, I created sliced bread. I cured cancer yesterday afternoon. You really need to hire me. Come on.
Yeah.
But this is what you hear when you're interviewing with people. Or worse, they sit there and they clam up because they don't know what to say or otherwise. So what we built is a way to find these A players, these superstar folks, and they're actually good at it without even having to say a word. We know this without a single word to them.
I remember I asked you, because we're going to have to wrap it up, and I could talk to you a lot, because this is near and dear to my heart. Getting the right people in the right roles, paying them the right wage is like so important for scaling clinics. But I remember asking you, so once you give them the people, like how many actually, make it, as opposed to the people that the clinic turns down? And you gave me some really interesting information. So, because you just say, hey, we've got a match. And most of the time the people are like, okay, and they just start them, which I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah. Some folks, so we'll find the top 2 or 3 candidates for the position. Now, if one comes in that's a superstar, we reach out to our team reaches out to the practice, says, you got to move on these guys right now. They're a superstar. And so a lot of times they'll, like what we do at our practice is Build My Team does the hiring for the practice. A great candidate comes in the morning, our practice manager calls them immediately. Hey, can you come in at lunch for an interview? Can you come in this morning for an interview? There is never a delay on that, because those A players, they want decisiveness. They want people who know exactly what they're doing. They're magnetically attracted to practices that have their act together. And these folks come from all walks of life. They do all kinds of things previously, but that's the move to get them in there. And then as far as who stays, it's well over 90%. We do not have the same. We're in a completely different plateau for folks leaving than what folks are used to.
I can see that, because an A player wants to be wanted, and they want you to recognize, like, if you're really good at something. I mean, there's a lot of people who have imposter syndrome, but pretty much if you're a good player, right? If you're good at something. And so when you want to be recognized for that, right? I'm not some schlub, Right. And so if the company responds in time, you're automatically like, yeah, you recognize my greatness, right? But then you go in, you have a conversation, you're much more willing to accept a job like that, feel like you're going to be valued, and negotiate, because they knew, and you'd be like, well, they really recognized me. And if you have a good conversation, it's good, but it's going to be a match. So anyway, guys, we're going to have to end it. So, but tell me, what were you going to end it on before we go? Because they're like,
I think that the main thing on the practice side of things for the practice managers and the docs, there's a better way. It was born out of the fire of hiring and firing and the misery of doing talent, like finding outstanding talent in practices. This is not academic. This is how to find those A players, whether they know they're A players or not, how to find them reliably, predictably, and do so very, very quickly. And that's what we built. It's very affordable. And the one thing I forgot to mention is you can actually, believe it or not, you can hire somebody as a practice owner or practice manager with less than an hour's worth of work total. You can actually do that with Build My Team. Yeah.
Well, guys, we've been here with Dr. Michael Neal of Build My Team. That's buildmyteam.com. And as always, if you go to our website, superclinicproject.com, and you click on the links, join our free school, we'll have all of his links. He even has an ebook that we're going to be able to give you that has a lot more information for you on this. And we're probably going to bring him back for a private webinar with some of you docs. So be looking forward to that in our future. Again, this is Super Clinic Project. Like, follow, share, and please rate us. Give it that 5-star review. That's how we're able to find these unicorn diamonds in the rough that can help you guys out. Have a great day, and thank you, Dr. Michael Neal.
Thanks so much, Jennifer.
You've been listening to the Super Clinic Project Podcast. If you like what you hear, subscribe and stay tuned for further episodes of the Super Clinic Project Podcast.